On this episode of Failure to Launch, we're doing something a bit different because we're talking about Spookies, which you may say to yourself, I wasn't really expecting a sequel to that. So does this qualify? And this movie's history is pretty wild and was a pretty obscure little creature feature that's seeing a new life these last couple of years, and it seems like a sequel or a successor is in the cards. And how do I know that? Well, today I have a special guest with me, and it's the producer of the original Spookies, Frank Farel.
What in the world am I doing here?
Well, we've hijacked your feed to bring you on to discuss this cult classic film and what comes next, and you'll tell us about that journey.
It's an amazing long road that I've traveled with this film, and I can't believe that the film and myself have somehow triumphed over the fact that this film destroyed my life at one time and several other lives.
So Spookies came out back in 1986 and begins with two carloads of people looking for a party and a young boy on his birthday encountering a man in a tree. Like who hangs out in trees except questionable people? And he gets killed by a cat man, and yeah, that's I guess what you get for just sitting in a random tree talking to 13-year-olds. But there's also an old warlock who has a woman in stasis, and our party crew have to get past this branch, which just drive over it. And I'm kind of curious about this group. That there's a couple of new wave guys who talk like they're from Jersey, but there's also this older couple. Like, how did they end up headed to the same party together?
It was an attempt, the reason the characters are sort of a motley group that doesn't seem to belong together is because they, in terms of the conversations that took place, you sort of established the fact that, yeah, these are not exactly people that hang out together.
And they're a pretty eclectic assortment of people.
We rejected the idea of teenagers, so even the youngest characters in that are maybe in their early 20s. Right?
Yes, yeah.
And then we wanted to, we had the older actor who's in it, Peter Dane, who plays the character Peter, I think, in it. That we wanted to, just diversify it. So the idea was that this was a car full of people that had just left a party where they had gotten thrown out of it because of the behavior of Duke.
They end up at this big mansion where they think the party is, and little Billy is pretty horribly killed. He gets his face slashed and is then buried alive, which is a pretty ballsy way to take out your kid character. By the way, Billy has no interaction with the main cast and won't, and his storyline doesn't factor into the partiers. Those guys find a sort of Ouija board, make contact, and Carol gets possessed, Evil Dead style. One gets pulled into the ground and they face zombies, then make that crucial horror movie decision to all split up. They then encounter the farting dirt monsters?
The farting we had nothing to do with. We did create and design and shoot the scene with the Muckmen. To Michael, a fart was the highest form of entertainment.
So he's the one, he put the farts in there?
His love of farting became well known amongst the new people. And apparently, when they screened that scene for him the first time, the sound effects editor, as a joke, had added all the farting sounds.
Yeah.
And for him, and he was just bowled over. This is the best thing ever. This is hilarious. Of course, we're going to keep this.
Meanwhile, the bride is resurrected, but she wants nothing to do with Creon, who also sends this sort of awesome ghoulies thing. But then this tentacle creature that can melt faces, this weird witch puppet, and then this Grim Reaper thing with some kind of material in its mouth. Whoops. And I'm going to point out that I had always hoped that it didn't kill Duke here because for some reason, young Josh really liked Duke. And I mean, they sort of show him getting killed, but in this flying shot across the room, he doesn't look too sliced up. So I guess there's always hope. Next up, a particular highlight, the Spider-Woman, who transforms into this kick-ass creature that then just drains a guy dry. And you know there's a ton of cool creature effects in this one, and two of the guys responsible for them have been on this channel. Gabe Bartalos, creator of The Leprechaun, and Vincent Guastini in some of their earliest works. They have a final face-off with possessed Carol, who really hammers home that Deadite connection. Join us. And her head splits open. And now, in this version of the film, she's being controlled by Creon. But in the original version of the film, what was the original intention?
The woman who becomes possessed after playing with the Ouija board early in the film is sort of the focal point of all this stuff. And the whole idea was that she's in the house, she's got the Ouija board, and she's using it to call up these various demons that then go after the people in the house. The monsters that are in the film are all pictured on the Ouija board.
She starts by aging the remaining 3, but they manage to destroy the board, but I guess that everyone still dies.
Peter, the older character, and I think is it Linda, who's his girlfriend?
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, and you see a little of it in what exists, they suddenly start to age rapidly.
Yes.
And in the movie that exists now, they apparently die because you don't see them again.
So originally they were meant to win, but not here. Meanwhile, Isabel kills Creon, but is then attacked by more zombies, and she seemingly gets away, but the Catman gets her, and Creon is still alive. Alright, famously, this movie didn't quite turn out the way that it was intended, and things started going wrong right off the bat.
What went wrong there is that we were at odds with our backer from day one, because he was on us constantly. I mean, and you have to understand, we have just the whole process we had to go through just to get the script approved, to get him to agree to put up the money, took months. And it was mostly like trying to satisfy a cranky baby or something. We finished the film. We shot everything we needed. The only thing that had yet to be shot was special effects, mostly opticals, that would figure in the climax.
Yeah.
Because the climax was originally supposed to be that part of what happens is that the whole building is surrounded by flying skeletal ghosts, and it was a whole, we thought would be a spectacular finale.
But Michael had other ideas.
We had a rough cut of the movie. It was about 2.5 hours long, as most rough cuts are. I mean, that's like every possible usable thing that we thought might be usable. Every shot is overly long. It's got extra footage at the beginning and end. Action overlaps. It's a rough cut. We continued to cut the film. My partner Tom, at one point, got the flu, and he was out sick for like 2 weeks. And he came back, and Michael had recut a couple of the scenes that Tom had already cut. And this was Michael just being antsy and feeling like he needed to do something. So he just started tearing scenes apart, not knowing anything about what he was doing, and just utilizing the editor we had hired to do his bidding.
And I imagine that did not go over well.
So there was a screaming argument that went on, and I was there listening to it. And then Tom came out of the room and said, "All right, we're off the movie."
And that was it? Your involvement was just done?
I mean, we walked out, and we realized it because he was threatening legal action left and right. And we talked to our attorney, and our attorney said, "All right, well, the first thing you have to do is serve him with papers and get him to pay all the outstanding bills for your company." And so that's it. Essentially, we had to instantly sue him.
Yeah.
Right, and that didn't help to rebuild the relationship. So, I mean, that's the direction we went in. Within a short time, he managed to encounter Eugenie Joseph in the same editing house in another editing room. But I mean, initially he wanted her to just finish editing it, and he was going to try and figure out what he could do for the climax, because the optical effects that we had planned were being done by a member of our production who had to do this stuff. And the alternative was to go to an effects house and be paying thousands more dollars than the company. And somehow she convinced him to come up with an entirely separate story and intertwine it with our story.
So then she shot all the footage with the little boy's birthday party, the Catman, Creon, and the whole ending with the zombies, but then I guess cut out a bunch of the footage that you guys had shot?
Any character stuff, like actual stuff between the characters, that might have given them at least 2 or 3% more depth than they have. It's just not there.
Well, you talked about that 2.5 hour rough cut. Does that still exist somewhere?
This is a question I will be asked until I am dead. And then after I die, the footage, of course, will turn up.
Yeah.
But the fact is that everything was destroyed.
So what do you do afterwards?
We were totally disgusted by what had happened, and we continued to try and make movies and raise money for movies and write scripts, etc. But this was just an albatross around our neck. I mean, it was just like this thing that was like, all right, how do we live this down? We can't go to people and say we made this and expect them to react positively.
But then within the past handful of years, there's been a resurgence of sorts, though, right?
When our Blu-ray came out and the public, like, suddenly there was, like, everybody was desirous of Spookies. Everybody suddenly knew Spookies.
Yeah.
And it became something that it wasn't before.
Real quick, I'll point out that there is a film that's billed as a spiritual sequel to Spookies called Killer Dead from 1992, but it isn't really a sequel per se, but it's simply another movie from director Brendan Faulkner, who directed the Tortured Souls part of Spookies, and it features some of the same actors, but its plot isn't related and it's something new entirely, so calling it a sequel isn't really fair. So it's a sequel to Spookies in the way that Hot Fuzz is a sequel to Shaun of the Dead. Some of the people that are in it may be the same, but it is not connected. But in terms of an actual follow-up, let's say that everything didn't go sour and you remained involved in the film. Did you envision a sequel back then?
I think we could have made a successful film, and you're talking about sequels. I think we could have gone right on to a sequel. No reason if the film had made money.
Yeah.
But the film got turned into a different film. None of us could claim any ownership or satisfaction, or Tom went to Roger Corman's company at one point and was basically thrown out after showing them scenes from Spookies. So I mean, the film should have, like many other films of that sort at that time, a lot of low budget films, they didn't necessarily make spectacular money, but they made enough, and then like sequels came.
Yeah.
And how about now? What about a modern Spookies sequel?
Well, that's what we're talking about and planning and should have no problem doing, because the world is just waiting. I'm literally in the final few pages of revision on the first draft of what will be Spookies 2, but it won't be technically Spookies 2, because the original film was called Twisted Souls, so this will be Twisted Souls 2. Even though most people don't know Twisted Souls 1, but that's fine. And what I have written for this is essentially is based on a story that myself and my partner, Tom Doran, I mean, back in like the early 2000s, we talked about, well, gee, what if through some miracle that will never happen, we had the opportunity to make a sequel to this.
But will it be an actual sequel? Will it be called Spookies 2?
It could be, probably. We are still negotiating something with Vinegar Syndrome, the company that released the Blu-ray. Now, they also, when they bought rights for their Blu-ray release, they bought world rights of the film into perpetuity. If we want to associate it with Spookies, if we want to mention Spookies, if Spookies is used in the title, we have to get rights from them. However, I wrote something, and Tom and I from the start figured we could do it this way. And there are direct references to things in Spookies and characters, or at least one character. But it could be taken out and no one would be any the wiser, and it would not really change the movie aside from what, in fact, at this point, I sort of see having the connection as fan service.
Yeah.
It's mostly there to make people, it's like, I think, we'll get it probably more people to see it if they think there's an association with the first movie. But it's not like we're trying to remake or do the first movie, or even do what we feel is a better version of Spookies, or to try and do what we thought we did on the first film that got torn apart.
So it's theoretically a successor that also acts as a sequel.
We want to, Tom and I agreed, said, look, we have to show them we can make a real movie, not just some genre piece that's forgettable or trivial. We have to make a movie that's like so good and so entertaining that no one's going to be able to blow it off. And that's what I've endeavored to write this time.
So there you have it, the story of Spookies and what went wrong, why it's never got a sequel, and how it may still have one in the future. If you've seen it and love it as much as I do and want to see more, let us know down in the comments there, and of course, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it out. Also, check out the patrons who help keep this channel going, and you can be one by going to patreon.com/movietimelines. Real quick, I want to say thank you to Frank Farel for coming on and telling his story here.
And if I can here, I just want to thank all the fans of Spookies and Street Trash. The fans of my films have made me realize that maybe I didn't spend like the past few decades of my life just delusional and thinking that I was a filmmaker. Because Tom and I just went through long periods of time where we felt that way. We'd still be plugging away and writing and trying to get money for this or that. And we would, we'd feel at times, look, are we completely out of our minds? Should we be in a home somewhere doing this? Because an eye on us?
Well, I mean, we'll be keeping our eyes on you and the news of that follow-up. And again, thank you for coming on here, and thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you soon for another great video.